Hello everyone, we meet again on the emotional journey of Hoai-Ka. After days of separation, the long-awaited reunion has finally arrived. Hoai-Ka has met Hung again. Her heart seemed to burst with joy, happiness overflowing in every breath. Yet amidst those emotions was a vague silence. The memories of the past still hadn't returned. Like a familiar song missing its lyrics, only the quiet melody lingered somewhere in her mind, even as she stood in front of Hung, the man who had once been an inseparable part of her life. Hoai-Ka still couldn't feel a sense of familiarity. She was cautious, as if an invisible veil still separated them. Strange faces around her stories she couldn't recall all made her feel even more lost in the very world that used to be hers. At present, Hoai-Ka is living with Grandma Bae's family, a simple yet loving home. Though the house isn't spacious, it is always warm and welcoming. Together, it paints a peaceful, everyday picture for which Hoai-Ka feels grateful with every moment spent there. From early morning, Hoai-Ka had been up helping Grandma Bae with chores. She cleaned the yard, swept cobwebs from the corners of the porch, then hurried to wash the leftover laundry from the day before. Each of her movements was slow and careful, as if even the smallest task held special meaning in her journey to rediscover herself. The sun rose high. Sweat dotted her forehead. Her hands reddened from the cold morning water. Seeing this, Grandma Bae called out from inside the house, "Ka, come in and take a break. Have some water. You've been working since morning." Hoai-Ka smiled in response, but still bent down to hang the last of the laundry. She wasn't used to stopping halfway, nor did she want anyone to have to remind her twice. Only after completing her work did she step inside, moving quietly so as not to disturb the peaceful space. Grandma Bae was sitting on a rattan chair, rubbing her left shoulder, her face slightly grimacing from pain. Hoai-Ka noticed and gently offered, "Grandma Bae let me massage your shoulder. I saw you wincing earlier." "Oh, I'm used to it. It'll pass." Grandma Bae waved her hand with a smile, but before she could say more, Hoai-Ka was already behind her, gently massaging her shoulders with tender movements, careful not to cause pain. The room fell into silence. In that simple moment, an old woman and a young girl connected through pure affection. No flowery words needed. She gently squeezed Grandma Bae's hand as if to say thank you, without speaking. Outside, golden sunlight still softly filtered through the leaves, casting light on the wrinkled yet kind face of Grandma Bae, the one who had given her a place to start over. While Hoai-Ka was slowly finding moments of peace with Grandma Bae's family elsewhere, Hung and Jo were tirelessly pursuing the truth behind the pain that Hoai-Ka and her mother had suffered. Hung was like a man walking in darkness, carefully navigating through shattered fragments of trust and doubt. He couldn't believe that his own mother, the woman who had given birth to and raised him, could be so heartless as to commit such a dreadful act. His heart was torn between two realities. On one side, his faith in maternal love. On the other, increasingly undeniable evidence, forcing him to face a truth he wasn't ready to accept. Joy quietly walked beside him. He said little, didn't blame anyone. He simply used his calm demeanor and sincere heart to comfort Hung through the most stressful moments. Beyond the torment involving his mother, Hung also faced another danger. The thugs his mother had once hired were now returning to collect what they were owed. They weren't just random street hooligans. They were part of an underground network organized and ruthless if denied what they wanted. Hung didn't have the money to pay them, nor could he ask anyone for help. All of this stemmed from his mother's misguided decisions. And now, he, her only son, had become the only shield left to bear the consequences. Joel looked at his friend with both admiration and sorrow. He knew Hung was carrying far too much, but he also believed a man willing to rise for the one he loves, even if it means standing against the world, would eventually bring her back, safe and whole. The motorcycle gently turned onto familiar roads, its wheels rolling over uneven ground, like the layered weight in Hung's heart. The small house appeared in view, still as quiet as before, except now it was devoid of life. The mossy walls, the faded roof tiles. He gently pushed the door open. A layer of dust blanketed everything, as if time itself were trying to erase the memories stored there. But for Hung, every brick, every window pane held the imprint of the girl he loved. He opened the door and stepped inside. The house was empty, but not cold, for within it still lingered the warmth of old days. When his eyes landed on the small wooden table near the window, where a bouquet of flowers had been neatly placed, his heart clenched. That bouquet, it was the gift he had given Huai Ka on Valentine's Day. Back then, he had been clumsy, only daring to buy a simple bouquet, but it held all his sincerity. Huai Ka had smiled, then a smile bright as the sun, and cradled the bouquet like it was a priceless treasure. He remembered clearly how she said, "Flowers don't need to be expensive, only genuine." That memory replayed like a slow-motion film, each frame clear enough to sting his eyes. So many hardships had passed. So much pain had fallen on her life, yet Huai Ka still lived with grace, still kept that bouquet, as if holding on to a small flicker of hope in a stormy life. Back in the present, Hung sighed. He couldn't let this house remain abandoned and dusty. Even more so, he couldn't let Huai Ka have no place to return to, if one day her memories came back. But more than anyone, Hung knew now was not the right time. Bringing her back amidst this chaos would be like pushing her into the storm once more. He needed time to resolve everything to protect her in the quietest, most silent way. Resolving this, Hung went to find a broom in the corner of the house and began to clean every nook and cranny. He wiped the dust off the altar, swept cobwebs from the ceiling, gathered the fallen leaves from the yard. Slowly and carefully, as if tending to a sleeping patient, the patient being the beautiful memories between him and Huai Ka. Once everything was tidy, Hung stood on the porch, deep in thought. He knew he couldn't stay here every day to watch over it. He needed someone trustworthy, careful and meticulous. Someone who could take care of the house, tend the small garden, and most importantly, keep everything ready for Huai Ka's return at any moment. With that in mind, he rode to a nearby house where a young woman lived. Hung politely knocked on the door. After a brief conversation, he made his request. "I have a house that needs looking after for a while. Just help me take care of the place. Feed the chickens, tidy the yard. I'll pay you a monthly wage. Could you help me with that?" The girl was momentarily surprised, but then nodded. She had heard the story of Huai Ka and the hardships she had endured. In Hung's eyes, she saw the sincerity and deep concern of a man who truly loved the woman in his heart. Hung carefully explained everything to her: the schedule for feeding the chickens, how to water the vegetable beds behind the house, and most importantly, he emphasized that everything inside the house must remain unchanged, even the old bouquet of flowers. The girl nodded, assuring him she would handle it all with care. Before leaving, Hung took out the first month's salary from his wallet and handed it to Hyen, a gesture of both gratitude and trust. He turned back to look at the house one more time, his heart lighter. Now he could be at ease. Hoi Ka's home would always have lights on, always be cared for, and always be ready for her return. He whispered, as if sending his words into the wind. Just wait a little longer, Ka. Once everything's settled, I'll bring you home. So this place will be filled with laughter again like the old days. The motorcycle engine roared gently in the quiet twilight. Hung rode away carrying a firm belief that even if a little late, the woman he loved would one day return to that house safe, whole, and at peace. That late afternoon, soft golden sunlight filtered through the tree branches. It was time for Hung to pick up Tony. Uncle and nephew stopped by a nearby convenience store. Tony was allowed to choose his favorite box of milk, some cookies, and a few essential items for Hoi Ka. Though he didn't say it out loud, Hung always felt a quiet urge to make up for everything for both mother and child, even if only through the smallest things. The motorbike came to a stop at Grandma Bay's gate. The small, modest house was always warm with affection. Hung turned off the engine, lifted Tony into his arms, and stepped inside. The moment Tony saw his mother, he shouted joyfully. She reached out to receive him, holding the little boy tightly in her arms. That embrace seemed to ease every fatigue, every lingering doubt inside her. A while later, the whole household gathered in the small room. Everyone sat together chatting about everyday things. The atmosphere was light and intimate, like a real family. Hung suddenly took a few neatly folded bills from his wallet and placed them on the table, sliding them toward Grandma Bay. I know your family isn't well off, but I hope you'll accept this to help take care of Hoi Ka and Tony while I can't fully provide yet. Grandma Bay immediately shook her head, her voice firm yet affectionate. No, son, I won't take it. Hoi Ka and the boy being here, that's fate. I love them like my own grandchildren. It may be a small amount, but you're carrying a heavy load. Keep it and manage things as best you can. Hung looked a little embarrassed, his hands still resting on the money. He gave a small smile and bowed his head in thanks. Then his eyes turned to Hoi Ka. He gently pushed the money toward her. Then, you take it. Buy some things for Tony. It's not much, but it'll help ease my guilt. Hoi Ka was about to refuse, but Hung's gaze was so earnest. She quietly nodded, her hand trembling. As she accepted the money, her heart a storm of emotions. Time seemed to slow inside the small room. Tony rested his head on his mother's lap, eyes half closed with fatigue. Standing up, Hung brought his hands together in a respectful gesture. Thank you so much, Grandma and Ha. Without you both, Hoi Ka wouldn't have this peace. Grandma Bay simply smiled and nodded in response. As for Hoi Ka, her eyes followed Hung, wanting to hold him back, but unsure what to say. Hung stepped toward the door and turned to look back one more time. Inside the small room, the soft yellow light shone on the faces of 3 women and 1 child, a simple yet heartwarming scene, more precious than anything he had ever known. He would return soon, once everything was settled. He whispered in his heart, then quietly stepped away, carrying a steadfast belief that this place would always be a gentle haven for the woman he loved.
Sau bao ngày xa cách, cuối cùng thì cuộc hội ngộ định mệnh cũng đã đến. Hoài Kha đã gặp lại Hùng, trái tim cô như vỡ òa trong niềm vui sướng. Phúc như trào dâng trong tình hơi thở, nhưng rồi xen giữa những cảm xúc ấy lại là một mộng mơ hồ, ký ức về quá khứ vẫn chưa trở lại, cũng như một hình ảnh trong xóa đi phần đời. giai điệu lặng lẽ ngân vang, trong đó tâm trí đứng trước Hùng, người đàn ông từng là một phần không thể thiếu trong cuộc đời cô, và ta vẫn chưa thể tìm thấy sự thân quen. Cô cảm thấy dè chừng, như thể giữa hai người vẫn còn một bức màn ngăn cách vô hình, như gần một lạ lẫm. Những câu chuyện cô không thể nhớ khiến cô càng thêm lạc lõng trong chính thế giới đã từng là của mình. Thực tại Hoài Ca đang sống cùng gia đình bà Bảo, một gia đình ấm áp, giản dị nhưng trong phố từ